Steven Pinker, the author of the book Enlightenment Now, one that will give you hope that we're actually going to make it, is joining us now. Stephen, can you go over just a little bit, and if you want to mix in, however you want to do this, but I have two questions. One, can you give us a little 101 on critical thinking? And two, what the Enlightenment means and why losing that, we lose really America and the West?
Yeah, so an example of critical thinking would be to examine the kind of fallacies that the human mind just naturally makes unless it's well educated. So just give you an example. I mean, many people have the experience where they had a dream that something bad happened to a loved one, and call them up, find out, they broke their toe. So they think, I've got clairvoyance. I can actually sense things that I don't know about through, vibrations or some sort of kitschy energy fields. But the thing is, that's a failure of critical thinking because we don't take into account the thousands of times that we have dreams that don't predict the future. We forget all of those. We remember the lucky hits. And so we falsely conclude that there is something spooky going on. Or another example is the so-called gambler's fallacy. If you're at the roulette table and you get red 5 times in a row, and so you bet on black thinking, it's bound to come up black now because you think the idea, it's 50% red, 50% black. So far it's a lot of red, so it's due for a black. Now that can't be true because the roulette wheel doesn't have any memory. It doesn't have any desire to appear fair. It's a misunderstanding of randomness. People think that the law of averages means that the numbers are trying to appear 50-50, whereas the reality, of course, is that if there's any chance deviation, then it'll be diluted when there are more and more spins in the future. And we tend to underestimate randomness. We think we see patterns in everything, and we forget about how many vast number of possibilities for coincidences. We're just surrounded by numbers. We're surrounded by events. I mean, who's to say that you might not look out the car window, see a license plate in front of you, and maybe it's almost like your telephone number? That just is going to happen by the law of averages, but people see deep meanings in them. So critical thinking, the point is to teach people to avoid falling into these traps. Also, to recognize that since it feels so good to have your beliefs confirmed, you feel noble, you feel wise, you feel like your own team, your own tribe is superior. So we concentrate on all of the stories and studies and opinions that back up the opinion that we have in the first place. And we ignore all of the criticisms, the studies that may not come out our way, and get more and more positive about our beliefs. This is another trap that we fall into. And we know it's a trap because we know that people in the past believed things that weren't true. People believed that the world was flat. People believed that racial segregation was just the natural order of things.
How do we break this team thing that we're in now that, we're willing to switch long-held principles because it benefits our team or whatever? How do you hold on to things that are true when they don't work your way, when society is pushing the other direction?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, and I don't have an easy answer. But certainly being aware of the problem is a place to start, just to know that we're all human beings. We all have weaknesses, and one of them is this kind of tribal team thinking. There is a truth out there, and none of us knows it for sure. It's a constant struggle to learn. We can be mistaken, and we should recognize our fallibility and recognize our tendency to fall into supporting whatever is good for the team, which is not necessarily what the truth is. I mean, it's really the attitude and mindset of science. If you're doing science properly, you're letting the world tell you which of your beliefs are true or false. You don't kind of walk in with certainty. Of course, scientists are human, and they do that, but that's why we have debate and argument and peer review, so that no matter how confident you are in your beliefs, if the experiments show that you're wrong, or if there's a flaw in your logic, then there'll be other people who will argue against you. But we need more of that mindset, I think, in the political arena.
Can you let's take you through, because you talk about this in the book, that income inequality is not necessarily what we're not thinking it through. It's not necessarily the problem that most people seem to think that it is. Can you take us through that?
Yeah, I have a chapter on income inequality because it's something that has increased within rich countries, and people often say, well, how much progress can there really be if we have all this income inequality? And I suggest that the problem is kind of misconceived, that it's not so much inequality that's the problem, but there are other problems. Certainly if the rich can buy elections or just pour money in and have politicians do what's in their interest, that's a problem for democracy. But that's not the same as income inequality. That's a problem with our laws that allow unregulated donations and without transparency. There's also, of course, you do have to be concerned with kids, with the elderly, with the unlucky, with the sick at the bottom end of the scale. And I certainly believe in the kind of programs that we have, like Social Security and Earned Income Tax Credit, that, it's almost a dirty word to call it redistribution, but there's a little bit of that, and all countries do it, all wealthy countries. And it really has helped the poor. The poverty rate, taking into account government benefits, has declined. In 1960, about a third of Americans fell below the poverty line when you measure it in terms of after-tax income. Now it's more like 6 or 7%. And I think we should concentrate our efforts more on helping the people at the bottom than worrying about the gap between the top and the bottom.
Aren't we better, though, in poverty, not because of social programs, but because this system actually works?
Yeah, I think there's some of these. Certainly the fact that we've got this fantastic wealth-generating machine called markets has done wonders for poverty both at home and across the world. So when China switched from state control and dogmatic communism under Mao to free markets, they made a huge dent in world poverty just because hundreds of millions of Chinese were lifted out of squalor and peasant existence to a kind of middle-class existence.
Foreign Policy's world's top 100 public intellectuals, not elitists, intellectuals, somebody who is pushing for return of the Enlightenment and is very, very optimistic and hopeful. His book is called Enlightenment Now.
And the book is filled with stuff that's really positive. And I mean this without hyperbole. It is the greatest human achievement in history, the things that have happened over the past 100 years.
Yes.
I mean, things have improved that much. And Stephen, I wanted to ask you talk about this in the book. When faced with really positive things like the reduction in poverty, we as human beings tend to still search out the negative. So we tend to always, oh, wow, poverty is down by so much. But look at this recent incident of violence. Look at, this problem with our food supply. Look at this chemical we found somewhere in the water. We're always looking for something to bring us back to the negative. Why is that?
Yeah, in some measure, that's good, that we don't get complacent. And it's because our ancestors, of course, were concerned about the problems in their era that they came up with solutions. And it's only good that we be aware of the problems that remain and some problems that might even be bigger than ever so that we tackle them. But it is true that we tend not to appreciate the progress that we've made, partly because we're wired for negativity. We are much more worried about losses and what can go wrong than what has gone right. And again, there's something somewhat adaptive about that because there are just things that can go wrong can do you much more harm than the things that can go right can help you. Just think about how many things could happen to you today that would make you much worse off, how many things could happen that would make you much better off. Well, the first one is a longer list, and indeed, we're right to be concerned about them. But I think we've taken that too far, because if we don't appreciate the progress that we've made, we can throw our hands up and say it's hopeless, it's intractable, we're doomed. So let's enjoy ourselves while we can and not even try to solve these problems because they're unsolvable. That is a danger. I think we can also welcome in radicals who say, well, the system is failing so badly, let's just bulldoze everything because anything that comes up out of the rubble has got to be better than what we have now. And that's dangerous, too, because we know from Nazi Germany, from Maoist China, from Venezuela, that if you have radical change in the hope that nothing could be worse, things can get a lot worse.
And it kind of goes back to the theme of the book of the Enlightenment. You said something earlier in the interview where you said, we have to look at where things have worked. That's what our founders did when they put this together. They didn't, like Iceland, say, hey, tweet us your constitutional clauses. They did a lot of research on history, and they scoured history to say this worked, this didn't. When it didn't work, why didn't it? And it was the spirit of open questioning, open examination without a team jersey.
That's exactly right. When people say, kind of wonder, well, are you saying that we should go and read a bunch of difficult European philosophers, or does it mean we have to all read Immanuel Kant? And say, well, no, the most prominent Enlightenment thinkers were our own founders and framers.
Yeah.
Jefferson and Madison and Hamilton and Adams. They were all Enlightenment thinkers. And exactly as you said, they tried to reason their way to the best possible system of government, in large part by looking at history and what had gone wrong and trying to learn from the mistakes of people in the past.
And it's really just my life changed when I read two things. Immanuel Kant, where he said, there are many things that I believe that I shall never say, but I shall never say the things that I do not believe. I didn't understand. When I read that, I thought, I don't even understand a world where you're afraid to say, what you believe. I do now. I understand that now. And the other thing was from Thomas Jefferson: fix reason firmly in her seat, and question with boldness even the very existence of God. For if there be a God, he must surely rather honest questioning over blindfolded fear. That's just a challenge. Both of those, as Kant said, dare to reason.
Dare to understand, dare to reason. Exactly right. That would have to be the motto of the Enlightenment, if there was one. And we are the beneficiaries of the Enlightenment whenever we enjoy the freedom of American democracy.
But we are now kind of, as I see it, locked horns in a three-way fight of postmodernism, that nothing is real, tribalism, and a few that are saying, no, let's challenge. There's a lot of good stuff ahead, but we've got some really heavy lifting to do mentally. Let's sit down and have that conversation and come together.
Yeah, that's right. That is largely my argument in Enlightenment Now, that tribalism is a real threat to the ideals of American democracy, the idea that Americans, or for that matter any other nation, should be ethnically homogeneous and should just compete for greatness against every other nation also competing for greatness. We kind of tried that. We got World War I, we got World War II, and the idea that nations can number one, they can coexist because there are many things that benefit everyone, that it's not a question if one wins, the other one loses. And trade, of course, is the prime example. But also that America is based on an idea, on a social contract, that there's no such thing as an ethnic American. You can be Protestant or Catholic or Jewish or black or white or German or Italian or Hispanic. We came together under an idea that governments can, if they're designed with the interests of the people in mind, can enhance people's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's why we have a government. The government is not just a kind of an embodiment of a tribe. It's a gadget designed to make us happier, and we've got to design it so that it will do exactly that.
So is it really designed to, I read the Declaration of Independence. It is not only our right, but our duty to reform a government if it becomes hostile to the rights it's supposed to protect. But what is interesting in the Declaration of Independence, it says, you just don't shake it off and go, well, that didn't work. Let's come up with something else. You have to shake it off and replace it with something that is better at defending those rights.
That's right. And I said government shouldn't be rejected for light and transitory purposes.
Right.
So don't think every time you have a complaint about government not working, don't think that it's time to overthrow the government, because you could end up with something much, much worse. And of course, we know that there are a lot of ways in which good democracy learns from its mistakes and reforms itself. And we should continue that process.
Got two questions that I'm very optimistic, because I believe that freedom, unlike anybody has ever imagined, is right over in the next 10 years because of technology. But because, I read enough on AI, ASI, AGI, I'm also very concerned about the goals that we are going to be putting into AGI. Where do you stand on this? Are you optimistic that we make this transition or not?
Yes, about artificial general intelligence.
Yes.
I think any new technology has potential for harms and dangers. And that was true of the technologies of the past. When cars were introduced on the roads, a lot of people got killed before there were traffic laws, safety measures.
But on this one, the argument is you really have one shot to get it right.
And I'm skeptical of that.
Okay.
Just knowing people doing artificial intelligence research. Now, I'll tell you, it's really, really hard the idea that we are going to come up with a magic formula and the magic algorithm and have a system that's not only going to be brilliant, but improve its own intelligence in zooming upwards, I think there's reason to be skeptical. That there's a lot of fails. It's a trial and error process. And of course, we have to build in safeguards as we develop them, but I don't think it's going to shoot up beyond what we can control. And I do have a discussion of that in Enlightenment Now.
Let me close with this. There is something new going on, I think, and it is a willingness to break the barriers. And I first started feeling it about 6 years ago in Silicon Valley, where it was beyond the tribes, it was beyond left and right, with some, not all. And they were interesting conversations. And now there are thinkers like Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, of course, you know, yourself, the Weinsteins. Do you sense that there's a new